Hey everyone, welcome to C's Backstage. This is your all-access pass to design, produce, and inspire your next event. I'm your host, Troy Peters, Chief Experience Officer here at C's Productions, and I'm your guide through all these production-y things. Remember to subscribe to the podcast at cspro.com/backstage or wherever you find your favorite podcast. We are hunkered down here in Austin, Texas under a storm watch. We load in a pretty large show tomorrow. And we were thinking about what sort of things to talk about for the podcast this weekend. Production management, right? How do we do an event that's, like a citywide or a big high level event where it's all about communication, timing, logistics, making sure everything gets in place on time. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I've got 10 points we're going to go through for this podcast. Live events, they're live, right? They've got to be perfect. They've got to come together great. They've got to inspire and lift up people and get everybody communicating and talking. So whether it's working with the client, unions, managing logistics, hiring freelancers, sourcing equipment locally or shipping equipment across the country, putting on a live event with really no second takes, it's got to come together perfectly. When putting on citywide events or even events that fill up an entire convention center, maybe some neighboring hotels, we've got to focus on every little detail and the job skills that are needed to match that. This level of project or production management needs to be at the very top of the game, and we'll talk through all this in these 10 points and call out the major milestones, expected deliverables, timelines, site visits, production meetings, how to do diagrams and 3D renderings properly, managing crew, sourcing equipment locally, shipping equipment in, trucking, all of that. And then once we've outlined the skill set and called out all the things that we need to deliver on site, we'll talk about how to close it out and how to ratify the show and make sure we've captured all the information so we can bill it responsibly and close out the event and hopefully plan for the next one. So with that, let's talk to the path for success in production management. Number one, what is production management and what does it take to be a successful production manager? Some sort of foundation in audio or video or lighting or staging or production. Maybe you've been more of the producer or show caller side and you've fallen in love with the production management. But really knowing those pieces. I started out, as a lighting designer, lighting director in the motion picture industry, and one of my first experiences was managing a large crew, and it was a union crew, and having a team that was much older than I was. I was in my early 20s, but I had, for some innate reason, I had good people skills, and I was able to manage people and able to put the right people in the right roles. I remember one of the first productions I was doing for Disney, and I refused to do the show because I was like, I'm not qualified enough yet to do this. But what I did when they finally convinced me that I was the right choice, I went and hired the best people I could, put them in those roles, and I had one of the greatest experiences of my life. And this is when I was 21, 22. And to be able to see that, to be able to, even at this stage in my career where I've been in this industry now for 30 years, how do I put the right people in the right role for the size and scope of the show? So knowing all those things and relying on my logistics team, relying on my labor, my person that's hiring labor or a local labor broker, my freelancers, being in constant communication, all those things have made me a good production manager or project manager. But really you've got to have the right personality, the right style set, the right skill level, and really just kind of all around know how to communicate with all the departments and being able to move a project forward. You've also got to be professional. You've got to, dress the part. You've got to show up early, be ready with ideas, have that energy of like, we're gonna do this. We're coming in solid. This is gonna be great. We're going to move this project forward. You're the leader. Everybody's looking to you. You set the tone. So if you want to be that project manager, that production manager, you've got to enter the room with the right energy and really let the team know that we're here to win. Number two, what is production management? First and foremost, it's project management, right? We're doing a large production, but we're managing a project, right, from start to finish. So we really borrow those or at least I've been borrowing the Project Management Institute's guide of how to manage a project from start to finish. And there's basically 5 points. The first one is conception. Define the project, know what it is at a very broad level, that sort of 30,000 foot view of what the event is. Where are the venues? When are we getting into spaces? When do we get access to rooms? Figure it out, understand the feasibility and fit into the organization that we're working with, right? So every organization's a little bit, every client's a little bit different. So how do you work with them to make sure that the concept matches what they're doing? And that's really in conjunction with your producers, your executive team, and your account executive as well, because they're the ones that are kind of selling the show. But having, and speaking as somebody who's been an account executive as well for a long, long time, having a project manager involved early on, and even your technical leads involved early on, will allow you to put that conception and take it from a concept into reality. The next piece, after you've concepted the entire project, is planning. That's probably the biggest piece, right? And we use SMART goals, right? These SMART, and make sure that the estimated crew, equipment, and timing is there, making sure we've allotted it all to make sure that the project comes together on time and is a success. And on budget, right? Always. We adjust that accordingly as we go along to make sure we meet those goals throughout. But those SMART goals are S, meaning specific. Clearly state your goal, outline the project, make sure everybody understands what it is you're trying to accomplish. Make sure you're measurable. Measure those things. This is the M in SMART. Ensure you can measure success by setting milestones and having system checks in place. A in SMART is attainable. Make sure those goals and milestones are realistic. Don't set lofty goals that maybe we'll get to. Make sure there's a path to get to every measurable goal you're trying to reach. Make sure it's attainable. And then relevant, right? SMART. Make sure that the goals are within scope. They're part of your job. Don't be proposing something or trying to accomplish something that you don't have the skill set for, or the AV company doesn't do, right? Everybody's kind of got their areas of focus. And if you need to change your scope, then bring in those people, but make sure you're outlining it early on with your SMART goals. And then the T in SMART is time-based. Setting those milestones again and check for completion. Make sure you're checking off for things that you've completed. We use Gantt charts, which are essentially, you can't move through the project without completing something and moving to the next thing, right? We have to create diagrams in order to figure out how many people we can fit in the room and what sort of rigging we need to do. We can't just assign rigging and budgets for rigging until we know what those things are. So really being able to move things through the project correctly. And as they're time-based, you'll learn and you'll see whether things are unattainable and whether things are falling off the project. One last note with these SMART goals is they're not set in stone at the beginning and left alone. They're a constant tool that you need to rely back on and look back on in order to make sure you're moving through the project properly, making sure you're revising and addressing any issues, any setbacks, and anything that's moving forward quicker so that you can move everything else along in the right format. Number 3 in the Project Management Institute's 5 steps of project management is execution. This covers the entire physical project, from developing the right team, assigning resources, procuring more team members when you realize that you need to adjust scope or resources as well, adding equipment, making sure logistics are in place, and making sure that the full tracking of step 4 for monitoring is ready to be executed. And that brings us to step 4, monitoring. As you're moving through the project, always be looking back. Look at where you are, look what's coming up next, and then look behind. Even on site, I instill this meeting called a 4 o'clock. And it's at 4 o'clock. It never happens at 4 o'clock. It's whenever we can get the leads together, get the client together, get the venue management team together, and we talk through what worked well that day, what challenges we may have had, and then we look at the next 24 hours. But typically mid-afternoon is a good time when we're on show site to get everyone together and really kind of look at where we're at and measure where we've been, where we've come, and monitor the project as it's ongoing. Do that before, during, and after the event, all the way through. And then last, which is one of the things that maybe it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but there's a lot of clients, there's a lot of other AV companies, there's a lot of project managers that forget you need to close the show. And that doesn't just mean you've closed the books, time cards are done and handed in, and the bill's been sent out, right? The final invoice. It's really about reconciling all the objectives and deliverables. Did you bring everything that you said you were going to bring? Did you capture the things you needed to? Did we address and talk through challenges, things that may have failed, any equipment issues, crew issues, things like that? But really, you need to have an internal conversation and an external conversation at the end of every project, making sure that everybody understands what we did right, what we did wrong, and where we can improve, and hopefully do this again together at another time. All right, this takes us to number 3, scope of work. Let's talk through your workflow or your scope of work for the project. Obviously, your project has a budget. It has some sort of parameters around what it is, right? Is there a general session? Do we have breakouts? Do we have a reception? Are there off-site events taking place that we're supporting as well as audiovisual professionals? It's important that you as a production manager are setting expectations, hashing out what you need, looking at, are we doing a screen blend? Are we doing LED? Do we have the right technicians to fit the project that we've sold? Making sure that we are calling out any challenges that we might have, having those conversations with your account manager, making sure, and with the client, if that's what it needs to be, like, okay, we realize we need more rigging points because we're trying to accomplish this on this event that we're setting up for tomorrow. We want it to, because we're putting the general session in an exhibit hall, there's no way to control the lighting. So there's a lot more rigging going into this space, a lot more lighting, so that when people come in, we don't have to turn on or off the fluorescence. We really can just kind of control the room like we would in a sort of standard ballroom. And then the other part of that scope of work is accountability, really being accountable to ourselves, being accountable to our team, and holding our vendors accountable as well, making sure that we know when we can get access to ballrooms or meeting spaces, when we can get onto the loading dock, and figuring out who we need to communicate that with. Is there a safety officer that's going to be in control of the loading dock, or do we just book that through the venue or the sales or catering team, depending on the size and scope of the work that you're doing? Number 4 is time and communication management. Anybody who's attended one of my show management talks or stage management talks knows I talk a lot about time and communication, because that is the most critical piece of any project and moving a project forward. Being able to get the right information in and then disseminate it out to your team or your vendors or the venue or your client is so important. Putting the right versions on file names, right? We never put final because we know it's going to become final, version 3, version 4, version 5. Just start with that first, if you're building your production schedule, first one should just be production schedule for X show V1, right? And then just continue on. And then when you get on show site, just double check. Everybody got version 6? All right, we're good. We're on the same page. Rather than going, well, I've got the one that says final. Oh yeah, but that was 3 finals ago. But again, for all things, making sure that in the pre-production side of things, content, what kind of content are we getting? There's video files, what kind of PowerPoint or Keynote or Prezi, or I roll my eyes at that one a little bit. What are all those pieces? What are the audio? What's the music going to be that people are walking into the ballroom? Do we have any music rights we need to clear? Are we streaming? Are we bringing remote presenters in? Any of those things, right? Is there a panel? Do we need staging, chairs to come off and on stage? But really trying to build everything out in what we often call a show flow or a minute by minute, and really kind of just calling out the event as it's going to come together from the moment you're showing up on site, right? Where are we meeting for crew call? Which rooms do we have access to first? What's going into each of those rooms? When are our meal breaks? Should we be anticipating some overtime? All of those things will help you understand the project and communicate the project with your team. And again, that sort of carries through pre-production, production, and post-production. At the end of the show, who's handing off the records? Who are we delivering them to? Are we, did we have scripts that were updated? We do a lot of legal conferences, and if we're using a teleprompter and the script's updated during the show, we have to deliver the final script to the client because they have to hold on to that. They have to file it away for legal reasons. And then really just, as well as PowerPoints or anything else that really needs to be handed off at the end of the event, in conjunction with all the timings and time cards and equipment adds and removals, or maybe something failed, you take that off the bill, really closing that out at the end of that. In number 5, we have venue management. knowing the venue, doing a site visit, making sure again, when you get access to rooms, that's so important. So many times they're stacking shows right on top of each other. So knowing when you can get in and when you need to be out, right? Not just assuming you have the next day to strike your gear, but maybe you have to be out by midnight. Maybe you have to be out by 6 p.m. So if that's the case, do you staff it more? Do you design the show a little bit differently? Or in some cases, do you work with the team that was in there right before you? Maybe they've got a lighting rig in the ceiling that you're putting your stage in the same place. Maybe it's a slightly different video setup, but you can use their lighting to do your show, and that might be the way to go. But really understanding the venue, knowing where you can get, how you can get access to loading docks, knowing what security protocols are in place. There are many of times where I've had to get access a building at, our teams had to be on site at 5 a.m. and the building doesn't open up till 6 or 7 a.m. And we've got to make sure that the security team there knows. Now I've done it enough times that I've learned that who's my security guy, who do I call after hours, and making sure we do have that after hours contact. Venue management also includes rigging, power, internet. If we need to order those things, who do we talk to? How do we measure to make sure we're getting what we ask for? Especially when it comes to internet, we need that high streaming capabilities, high bandwidth, and then diagrams for rooms, right? So how many seats are we fitting in a room? Are we doing unique theater sets? Are we doing unique banquet sets? How close are they to the screen, right? Using our best practices that we've all learned about worst viewing point to best viewing point. Where do we want people in the room, and how that determines what size screens we need to have, what size fonts on screens need to be. Number six is people management. This can be the most challenging part because everybody has a little bit of a different personality, but as a production manager, you've got to be able to work with people. You've got to be able to listen to what people are bringing to the table, concerns, challenges, accolades. Share when something goes well. Make sure you're putting that energy into the room and into your team, and being able to be that leader and be able to manage those personalities. All right, number 7. Equipment management. This one's, I feel like a little bit easier because you've got leads in place. You've got a video lead, audio lead, lighting lead, staging manager or set designer that's going to manage all those pieces of equipment. You need to be aware of what's going into where and what's happening, how long it's going to take to set those things. And a good project or production manager has a base level understanding of all the equipment going into a room. Screen resolution, sizes, things like that, system paths for video signal, RF understanding, all that sort of thing is important to have a little bit of knowledge about, and that will allow you to just have better communication. But you've got those leads to manage that equipment. So as a project manager, are you designing a room? And I've got a great project manager I work with a lot. That's Cricket, James Labar, and he does room diagrams for all our breakout rooms and lists the equipment going into each of those rooms right on the diagrams. So you can hand a packet of diagrams to one of the team leads. They'll go start setting out rooms or handing that off to their team, and they can just go to town. They know how many microphones, all of the things that need to be in each of those rooms. So really managing equipment from a top-down level. All right, this is maybe the scariest part. This is number 8, managing outside variables. We were doing an event. This was many years ago, and it was a rooftop on a large building in downtown Phoenix. And Phoenix in the summertime has these huge storms that come through, and they come through in seconds. We were doing this big high-end event reception for some donors for a large university, and there was one of our I think it was actually my project manager on the show was tracking the weather app because it was a beautiful sunny day, but we know that sometimes when that sun sets, storms will roll in, and like I said, they roll in quick and they're furious. High winds, dust, lightning, and thunder, usually followed by a pretty epic downpour with flash flooding. So we were able to, the event was supposed to start off at 7 p.m. We were able to track a storm coming in fast, and we could tell by looking at Doppler radar and where it was coming up from Tucson that it was going to hit us by about 6 o'clock, 6:30. So we talked to the client, and everything was built. We'd set everything up during the day. So they moved the event up to start actually at, I think it was 5:30. We got everything that they needed to do, and we were off stage, and the event was ended. Everybody had moved moved inside for the closing part of the event, and the rain hit right when we were pulling computers off the deck and pulling our gear out, and it was furious. Wind was blowing sideways, palm trees were falling over. It was incredible. But really knowing what the variables are that are out there. We've seen the Super Bowl with power outage, right? We've had internet failures when we were doing virtual meetings during the pandemic, but knowing that what are your backup plans, having those uncomfortable conversations with your client, with your team. If somebody doesn't show up, say your keynote speaker doesn't show up on time, what do? Do you play more music? Do you make a VOG announcement? Really trying to make sure you understand all the processes, even when the SHIT hits the fan. Number 9, ratification and closing. Again, we've got to close out our shows properly. We've got to make sure we've captured all the information, and we can't do it unless we're capturing it throughout the entire process. From the moment your show is starting, or even during pre-production, you got to know how many hours people are putting in. You got to know what did the truck get delayed? Were there tolls? Was there delayed getting onto the dock? All these things have got to be captured, discussed as you're moving through the event, and then captured at the end, whether you have to bill for it. Hopefully you've had those conversations as they've happened, and you're able to share that with the client, or whether camera didn't show up, so we've got to take that off the bill. Make sure you're capturing that as well. Hopefully it's all good. Hopefully you're able to move everything forward and close out everything quickly and easily, but having those conversations, having an internal conversation, having an external conversation, making sure everybody feels good about where you've ended the show, because you want to do it again, right? You want to do this. You want to keep the business moving forward. Redo shows you can rinse and repeat are just the best, because we did it last year, we're doing it again this year. So really having a good way to close out the event, having no surprises when your account exec looks at everything that comes back, and submitting that final invoice, as well as making sure records or final versions of files are handed off in the way that they're supposed to. So number 10, really, it's just in summary, it all comes down to communication and timing. As production managers, we have to be available and responsive to our team, our clients, our vendors, and the venues. Getting quick and correct information is key in making sure everything moves forward properly, making sure you're being timely about everything, trying to be as responsive as you can, and that'll give you the most success in all your endeavors. Remember your SMART goals, trust the team that you've put together, know that your system redundancies are in place and you've had those uncomfortable conversations for the what ifs, what if something goes wrong. Be ready for those outside variables, review your challenges, and definitely reward your accomplishments and reward your team for their accomplishments. They'll carry you the distance if anything ever goes wrong, and you are sharing the value that they have to you. If you want to learn more, I actually teach a workshop. I'll be teaching a workshop in June at Infocom in Las Vegas. It will be a 2-hour workshop on production management for $1 million size events where you're taking over an entire city. I've had a lot of experience working on major professional sports team events, so you're not allowed to say, but you get what I've done. But really what it takes to project manage $1 million events and have so many moving parts and bringing everything together in the perfect way. So I hope you've learned something. This was, again, a little bit of our different podcasts, but hopefully a lot of education in this one. I really enjoy giving these out. If anybody ever has more questions about what they'd like to see on our podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, this has been C's Backstage, your all-access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. Remember to subscribe to our podcast at cspro.com/backstage or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Thanks, everybody. This was a fun one to give. I hope you learned lots. Cheers.